I'm very careful on role selection, and I try to be very careful on role selection because I just don't want to be. There's nothing worse being in a situation where you're in a role that you're not a good fit. Where you find yourself in that is basically show a bit of resilience, do what you can to have a positive influence in the role. Look at other options and plan a nice, elegant escape route. Failure happens all the time, but I think it's how you react to it. So I think I've always been, right, let's be positive. Let's understand why things didn't go quite as well as they should have done. And then let's learn from it. Let's learn from it and move forward. What I am obsessed with is making sure whatever I do get involved in, there's a real kind of aim there and a real vision and a real outcome to work towards. And I think that's what I need and that's what drives me.
Hi, I'm your host Chris Matthews and you're listening to the Mentor Collective podcast. Conversations that resonate, stories that inspire. In each episode, I'm joined by a guest. We explore their personal stories, the challenges and triumphs which have shaped them, and the invaluable lessons learned along the way. Join us as we navigate through 4 key themes: career journey and reflections, personal and holistic approach, leadership and values, and finally, mentorship, guiding and being guided. In each theme, we traverse the past, present, and future, unraveling the unique narratives of our guests. Welcome to the Mentor Collective podcast. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining me on the Mentor Collective podcast. I'm so excited to have you and to listen to you. We go back a long way, and you gave me my start in my career really in project management, which I'm ever appreciative for. But a lot of the people listening don't know you. So would you give a brief introduction to yourself, please?
Yeah. Great to see you, Chris. And after all these years, I can't remember how many years now, about 15 probably. But it's good to see you, and it's really exciting what you're doing with these podcasts. So I'm glad to support. So for those that don't know me, I'm Nick Quaife. So I've been working in the IT transformation industry for the last, 20 plus years. My background is project program management, but essentially I get involved with companies and help them transform whatever it is they're trying to do, but help them deliver their kind of vision, where they want to do with their company, whether that's grow their company, reorganize their company, or change some of their technology, or whatever it is. I help them do that. And over the years, I've kind of done, started off as a project manager, and now I'm kind of program director is my title, but really just a senior kind of change transformation guy who helps companies get stuff done really, and implement their strategies and help them on their journeys, whatever they're trying to do. So that's me. I've been doing it for a number of years. A lot of those years as an independent, and we'll talk about those. No doubt Chris is going to get that out of me over the next hour or so.
And yeah, I'm going to for sure pull as much as I possibly can, and with your permission. So we'll first start with sort of at the beginning. So if you think back to right at the start to where we are now, how did your journey begin? And I guess I usually ask, how did your journey in the industry begin? But it sounds like you've worked in a number of industries. So at least maybe back to when you started as that PM and to now, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll give you a bit of a potted history. So I was not one of these when I was younger who knew exactly what I wanted to do, other than being a footballer, professional footballer. And that, whilst I was quite good at football, that didn't quite come off. So I was like, right, okay, what we're going to do now? So I had one of those sliding doors moments where I could have gone to university after sixth form. I had a place at Newcastle or Liverpool to do business management, a degree. Or my mum actually at the time had encouraged me to apply for a business trainee job at Ernst Young. So obviously a big established accountancy firm, one of the big 4. And so I applied for that. So that was really the start of my career really, because I got offered the job there. It's hundreds and hundreds went for that. And there was 3 of us got this on this business trainee scheme with Ernst Young, which was quite good at the time, really, because there was a number of people applied for that. So I was quite pleased at that. So that was a job, proper job with a bigger firm, or go to university. And I actually chose to go down the, get a job route, basically. That was the start. So I did 3 years at Ernst Young on their business trainee scheme, qualified as an accounting technician, but quite quickly realised that it's pretty dry as a career, and I didn't really want to go down that route. So started thinking about alternatives, but it was great. It was a great grounding. And so after that, I followed a guy who was working at Ernst Young to Bradford and Bingley, and Bradford and Bingley got involved in audit. So for a couple of years, I did audits around the business, which was quite good. It was a good way I was in my early 20s. I think I was about 21. So it was a really good way for someone of that age to get around the company at the time and learn the ropes, if you like, different departments within the company. So that started off me in Bradford being built when it was a building society. And then they had again, I didn't really want to be an auditor. That wasn't really, it was a bit of a dry job, but it was good learning process for me. But then they were running an IT graduate scheme and a leadership scheme internally at Bradford and Bingley. And I thought, oh, that sounds good. Still not quite sure what I was going to do, but I jumped at that, and I was very lucky enough to get asked and invited to be part of that. And that was brilliant. So that really started me in my life in the IT industry, if you like, within Bradford and Bingley at the time. And I got involved in a project. So as part of the scheme, they did lots of different technical training, but they did management training and business analysis testing. They did the full life cycle of the IT world at the time. But it was the management side. I wanted to manage things. I'm still not quite sure. So I got involved in projects, and I worked on a project called MINT, which stood for MI New Technology at the time, very ingenious name. But working with this guy called Dave Illingworth, and Dave was a good guy, actually, and he's probably it's all about mentoring, the undertone of this podcast. So Dave was one of my first mentors, I would say. And he was great because he taught me the ropes, if you like, basic project management stuff. He taught me how to do a project plan. So that was great. So I did that for a few months. And then I got a big break, really, to run my own project. And it was Bradford and Bingley were going through a conversion to be a bank at the time. One of the things that you needed to do to become a bank was do regulatory reporting, but they had no internal way of doing that. So I ran a project to implement a new package. It was called STB, but it was a regulatory reporting package. So I was working with the group financial controller at the time. It was called Rob. He's a good guy. It was Rob. And it went really well. And we implemented it, but it was a really tight deadline because it was obviously one of the tick box items to becoming a bank for Bradford and Bingley at the time. So it was really quite high profile. I was early mid-20s. It was a big break for me, and it went really well. And that was my first big break, really, in project management. And I remember getting I was really chuffed. I got an email off the CEO of the company at the time, called Stephen Crawshaw, and he just said, "Well done, Nick, on how you managed that thorny issue." I remember his words exactly, and I just thought, "Oh, that was brilliant." And I really I got off on that. I was buzzing on that. So that was my first project management moment, really. And then I got involved in another bigger. They went into a joint venture, so I got a bigger role on the back of that. And then a big moment where things changed for me was IBM. They did an outsourced deal with Bradford and Bingley, so they outsourced the whole of IT. Bradford and Bingley did to IBM to run it as a managed service, and that was brilliant for me as individually, personally, because IBM, they really invested in their people, and I got all their training. I got involved with people from a broader perspective other than Bradford and Bingley at the time. So my world went from like that to that. And I had all these experienced people and all this investment in terms of training. So I learned, got all the, I got the toolkit for being the person I am today, I guess, from those days in IBM through the training and the experience I get. And then from then, I did 3 or 4 years at IBM. And then I took the big decision to be an independent contractor, and I went contracting, started off as a project manager and did bigger and bigger roles as I went, a number of different organisations, and I've done that since 2005. So that brings me right up to today, really. So I've done that. I've done a couple of more permanent roles, Generally, I've gone into organisations and helped them doing various roles on their transformation journeys.
There's a lot of, I think, and don't be afraid to talk, of course, because these things are normal to you. But I've made so many notes on the things that I want to come back to, and that they're not normal to everyone else.
Oh, right. Because I've just summed up 30 years in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Is that good or is that bad? I don't know.
But it shows that I'm good at stealing lots of information.
Yeah, that's it. That's why you are where you are. Well, I wondered, my first question, which is only a short one really, which is, did that email from the CEO, did you keep that, or is it just locked in your mind?
You know what? No, it's locked in my mind. It's locked in my mind, and it was really short. It was just short to the point. It's like, but for me as a young lad at the time, it was like massive. It really gave me confidence to then go on, and it really that really gave me the confidence. I like the whole being project managing something to a conclusion, be successful, getting the recognition for it as a team, but also from a personal perspective as well. And then so definitely was a pivotal thing. And that's why I mentioned it really, because I remember it quite vividly. I did have the email, but I've lost. I haven't got it anymore.
It's gone somewhere. Because it's funny because the job that you enabled me to get when we were working together in that insurance company, those were some of the biggest projects, or they were the biggest projects I had ever done up until that point. And it wasn't the CEO, but it was someone who I deeply respected and was very senior to me, also sent me an email with that sort of idea. And it resonates with me entirely what you're saying. It was just a moment where I was like, oh, I am actually it's not just like my boss telling me, oh, well done, just to keep me going. Someone who didn't even need to say anything has said something to me, and that similarly propelled me. And I really want to come back to that in the leadership piece, because I think it feeds in nicely to mentorship.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's come back to it later, but I always try and do that myself now I'm in more senior roles, I guess. I always try and do that, just drop a note to people, because I know it's really important, and it was important to me all those years ago.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I think is a really interesting path into this, which is not maybe less common in professional industry or sector, is that you chose to do a job traineeship over going to university. And when you look back on that decision now, what was it about going into work or into a traineeship that impressed you more than going into university?
I think I was just. I was always quite high achieving. I always did pretty well at school and everything. So I'd never describe myself as really academic. It just didn't like. I just felt that once you got into the depths of, once you got into a bit more serious, the higher echelons of school, and start doing A levels, and I imagine if you did a degree, it gets into a lot of detail around a particular subject, and it's very, you have to be very studious and academic to kind of drive that through. And I just felt that going into, getting a proper job and going into industry and business, etc., was a better fit for me as a person. That it was as simple as that, really. So I just weighed them up, and the idea of earning money and getting my own independence as a person by having my own job and my own money and being able to live off my own means, that was really important to me. So that was what I guess drove me back then, rather than going off. And I'm sure I'd have had a great time and going off to university and all the good stuff that comes with that and all the experiences come with that. But at the time, it was as simple as that. And I think the other thing as well, I wasn't particularly being driven by my parents at the time to go down the university route. I think they were a bit distracted. I'm not going to go into it, but distracted with some of their things going on with in their own lives around their business. And I think they were quite keen for me to get out and start earning, if I'm being brutally honest. So I think there was that slightly that dynamic as well, I guess. It's good seeing that we're talking about it.
It sounds like you've got a lot out of traineeships or apprenticeships and schemes to launch people from a much lower advantaged position or disadvantaged position into a more advantaged position. And so I guess that kind of scheme and that way of working is a big part of who you are now. I wonder, how has getting to where you are today via those trainings and via those schemes influenced how you deal with people and deal with your teams and maybe even look for people to skill up? Do you think it has influenced how you work in that way?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's not something I've thought about too deeply, but yeah, no, definitely. I think I'm a great believer, I guess, that it's not one size fits all in terms of education and development. And I think, rolling back the years, back when I was younger, it was very much kind of, and it was starting to change just as I was, they're starting to, obviously I did a couple of the traineeships, etc. But it was very much still the thing to do was to be deemed a success was to, get your A levels, get some good A levels, go to university, and then focus on a career on the back of that. So I think, but that doesn't fit everyone. So I guess, and I could have done that, I guess, but I mean, I chose not to, obviously, and I've done pretty well out of it, I think. So I've got no regrets over that decision, but it was one of those moments. Yeah, it's not one size fits all, but it is. And I think these traineeships, like my eldest son, for example, he's done this apprenticeship because he was not particularly strong academically. So it's a great fit for him. He's doing brilliant. Because he's a people person. He's very confident, and it suits him. And there's lots of people like that who aren't particularly turned on by academia or strong academically, but they've got a lot of the softer traits, softer skills, and the personal skills and other characteristics that mean they can be really successful in things. And I think what the traineeships and the apprenticeships do is give people a different route. And I think there's more and more of them now. And so I'm a big fan of them because it's not. Well, in fact, when I see that people have gone down that route, it's almost an advantage because you're getting that experience quicker and at an earlier age, I guess, and you're exposed more to the real world rather than going and no, it sounds like I'm really down on universities and that route, but I'm not at all. I'm not at all. I'm actually a big fan of that as well. But I think that's got its place as well. But I think with the degree route, I think you really need to. You need to go and study medicine or law. You need to do something that's going to really lead to a career rather than just something bland or broad. I thought business management, what I was going to go and do, was pretty broad, really, and so I was almost better off doing what I did because I got to where I wanted to be a bit quicker.
Yeah, and it's great. You're not coming across anti-university. I think the whole point of this is kind of appreciating where people have come from, and that's the route they've taken, and it is where you are now, and that's fine. And
it served me well. I've done well out of it, so I'm a big fan, and certainly I think it's good to have lots of different options rather than just one or two routes. Into a place now where we've got that, so that's good.
I'm going to shift gears now. So you're talking about challenges you faced in your career. So it sounds like you had a rapid rise through your trainees, and you've been in, you've seen different areas of lots of different businesses, and especially the auditing sounds like that was particularly interesting. I guess I think I'm more interested in this next question around your challenges that you faced, maybe when you went more independent, or at least in that stage of your kind of project management type of career and upwards. So could you share a challenge you faced, or maybe a couple if you have them, in your career, and the ones that really taught you valuable lessons or a valuable lesson?
So the one that springs to mind is 3 really successful years at UK's largest insurer, Direct Line, which was, it was a fantastic experience for me. And it's really kind of one of my pivotal roles, I guess, that I did so far. So I had 3 successful years there. I went in as doing an assurance role and got to project management, program management. Won team of the year there. we, on the back of that, I got a bigger role, portfolio role, and then I ended up head of delivery there, which is where we came across each other, and you ended up. We employed you in one of the customer focused projects, which was really good. It was really good, and that's where we met, and you did really well on that. Anyway, the point of telling you all this is that I'd had a great time, but I'd done 3 years there. It was time to move on. An opportunity came up in the north, where I live near Leeds, in Manchester, to do a role at another insurance company here based in Manchester. And it was to do run a big transformation program, which really appealed to me. And I walked into the role day one, and the role was complete. There was someone already doing the role that I met on my first day, doing the role that I thought I was going to do, the program director role. And I'd already committed to the job, and we just committed to a big mortgage to buy our big home for the family. So I was a bit stuck with it, really, but it wasn't great. But I had to get the head. So I got my head down. I did the best I could, and I was actually running the business change side and transformation. So there was still a significant role, and there was still a positive impact that I could make. But it was the first time I'd kind of walked into something that was really not quite what I was expecting at all, and it threw me. But head down, I had to show a bit of resilience, and I guess the lessons that came out of it, moving on to that, were that really, go since then. And I don't always get it right, by the way, but I'm very careful on role selection, and I try to be very careful on role selection, because I just don't want to be. There's nothing worse being in a situation where you're in a role that you're not a good fit. So I think my biggest lesson really is to take my time in picking the right roles, because there's lots of opportunities out there. But yeah, it's understanding yourself and what your strengths are, basically, and where your weaknesses are, and making sure you find the right roles. And I think you learn that over the years. And like I say, there's nothing worse than being in something where you're not a good fit. I hate that personally. So, but I've been in that situation 2 or 3 times over the last 10 years. And I think you just need to, where you find yourself in that, is basically show a bit of resilience, do what you can to have a positive influence in the role. And then look, plan your escape route, almost look at other options, and plan a nice, elegant escape route.
Yeah.
And that's the way I've dealt with it anyway.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're independent as a contractor, every day you work is money in the bank, and every day you're not working is the exact opposite. So there's even more of a pressure to finding the right role, as opposed to being permanent, where you can just kind of slot yourself in and just coast for 3 or 4 months until you find the next job. So I appreciate that would have been a really big knockback, especially also to have left Direct Line having such great success, and with a hope of a better life, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, exactly. It was a bit disappointing, but anyway, I'm also onwards and upwards type of guy. Let's make the best of it, and then I did a year though. I did some work with some good people, and we did some good stuff. The thing that was frustrating as well, it wasn't going particularly well. That the program that I was on the side, I was effectively on the sidelines, and that was frustrating. That I couldn't really influence that because I wasn't involved in any of the key decisions. Yeah,
I guess that kind of leads on nicely to another question here, which is, and when we were working together, I noticed about you that you do have a perseverance and you have a momentum about you. I wonder, when you experience failure, or what you perceive as failure for yourself, how do you embrace that and kind of roll with it, or what's your kind of approach to, okay, Nick has just failed by your standards or by someone else. What is your thought process, and what do you kind of do next?
I'm positive. I'm a positive guy, so I think if people see failure as failure happens all the time, but I think it's how you react to it. So I think I've always been right. Let's be positive. let's understand why things didn't go quite as well as they should have done, and then let's learn from it. Let's learn from it and move forward. So I've always been that type of guy. So and I see it all the time now, and a lot of the world we live in now in our industry is all around kind of success. Failure is not a bad thing. Shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. It's kind of how you deal with it and how you learn from it and how you move on and adapt. And I think that's a lot of the agile stuff that we're doing at where I'm at the moment and where I've been at other organisations is all about that. It's working, empowering teams to make their own decisions and to try things. If they do fail or something's not quite right, then just to reflect on it, make some changes and move on. And that's what I've been like with my career, I guess. So the co-op role, I had another similar role at LV, another insurer, which wasn't quite the role I was expecting as well. And then I had an experience with a startup consultancy called Airwalk, and all the roles were not quite a good fit for me. But rather than, it was just to kind of, right, okay, let's deal with it. It's not the end of the world. Let's be positive. Let's move on. And that's kind of the way I've always been.
And because the thing is, and again, this is like another instance where this is normal Nick, but this is not normal behavior as far as like the world is concerned, right? There's a lot of people out there that they see failure as an end point. Like an event happened and then something ended and that impacts me in some ways. But so there are people listening to this that see failure with a real sense of threat associated. And this is a kind of theme that comes up when we talk about failure in these podcasts, actually. Where does your sense of it's not the end of the world come from?
As a person, I've always been positive. I hate negativity. It's one of my pet hates. But so I've always been a positive person. So I think life is short. There's no point, in my opinion, no point getting too down with a situation. My view has always been, right, I'm in the situation. What can we do about it? Why has it happened? And what can we do about it? How can we change it? How can we influence it? And I think I've always been that type of person. So it's just always been inbuilt inside me, I guess, to move forward and deal with things. And so I've always applied that to myself, I guess, for my career. So I've had a knockback, it's just like, right, okay, that's bad, but let's, what can we do about it? And that's the way I try and be on a day-to-day basis in work, and that's how I've been with my career. So I'm afraid there's no deep and meaningful thinking behind it, or one reason I can pinpoint, but it's just a mentality, I guess, that I've always had.
So with that, I think we've thoroughly gone through the first theme. So if it's okay with you, I think let's move on to the second one, personal and holistic approach. So do you think you've got a good balance between your personal life and your professional life?
Yes. Yeah. No. So short answer is yes, but that's really boring. If I just said yes, didn't say anything else.
Maybe I can frame it in a way then, in an additional way. So thank you for your brief answer. For the longer answer, I guess you're obviously a driven person. You get the results that you are able to get within the circumstances you find yourself in, and because you're high achieving and because you get that, I think there's an association with that kind of series of behaviors or the role that you play. There's an association of that with working all the hours of the day, never having time to do the things that you love to do. But you've already said that you do sport and you have outside interests. So the answer is yes, that you have a good work-life balance. How do you ensure that you are getting that good work-life balance?
Yeah, so I've always been a great believer, work to live, basically. Getting the balance between family and doing things, sporting interests or whatever your interests are, is just essential in my book, and it always has been. So I've never been a great believer in working. Like, I think you need there's moments where you do need to work hard. So if I don't know, recently we've done some board updates, so we've put a lot of hours in to get those over the line. So there's moments where you need to put some hours in, but generally, I think you need to work your hours. But I think you need to then go home and spend time with your family and your loved ones and do the things you like, mainly just to get that balance right. And so I've not been a great believer in people just working loads and loads of hours. That usually to me signals that there's something wrong. And we actually think, well, actually, why are you working 80 hours a week? Actually, we probably need to strengthen the team and give you some support rather than you continuing to do that. So it's never been like, to some people it's a badge of honor almost, but to me it's no, I've never seen it like that. I've always thought, oh no, it's all about getting the right balance between doing a good job and spending time with with your family and your own personal well-being, I guess. So I've always been a great believer in that and getting that balance right. And I've always been quite good at putting work and family and personal stuff in their own compartments and keeping them separate and maintaining both. So something I've always been quite mindful of throughout my career, and I think it's really important for people. And I always say to people now who work for me or who I can see are under a lot of stress, it's like just go home and just chill out and just spend some time with your family and don't worry about it. And I think that's really important, especially in the industry, in the delivery, effectively project program delivery industry, which is what I work in. It is pretty stressful, and you do find a lot of times where you're under pressure, and you can see it. You can see it, and we just had it. I mean, I'm running a big program at the moment, and we've got a really crucial year this year. But I can see before Christmas that a lot of people are under a lot of pressure to working towards deadlines or whatever, and it was just like no. And like just go and have some time off at Christmas. And some people would say, "Oh no, we need them in, we need them in working." But my view is, no, go and have some time off, spend some time with your family, refreshed, recharge the batteries, and then you get better. More fired up and refreshed people coming back. So the balance is key.
I think there's also a part of stress and burnout, which is people not being fulfilled and spending a lot of time doing something which is not fulfilling. And there's almost like that element of this constantly climbing and struggling, which pushes them into a stressful position. It sounds to me like the way you describe the work you do, that it is fulfilling work for you. Is that true, I guess, first of all? And in which ways does work fulfill you?
Yeah, no, I do enjoy what I do. Yeah. How does it fulfill me? I like, and the reason I got involved in projects really, and why it resonated with me, that type of work, is because there's always a vision behind most of the things you do when you're doing these big programs, and there's a common goal for everyone, and I like that idea of forming and working with a team to achieve a common goal, and it's not a never-ending thing. I like the idea of working towards an outcome, delivering it, and then moving on and doing something different. I like that sense of achievement. It suits my personality. I get easily bored, I guess. So I could never do one of these operational roles where you're looking after a business as usual operation. That would just wouldn't do it for me. So I think. So I think that the project stuff and I find pretty fulfilling, and it works for me anyway.
And I wonder, is that the reason? Do you think then that the contractor lifestyle, the independent lifestyle, appeals to you more because it is more fixed term and fixed deliverable?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I mean, it's evolving. I mean, the thing I'm doing at the moment is a 2-year fixed term. So it's a fixed term contract again. But it's a slightly more skill in the game than if you're just a day rate contractor, I guess. And there may be more as I'm kind of doing more senior roles, I guess. There may be more of that. So I've never rule out I'm not obsessed with just doing day rate contractor roles, if you know what I mean. But what I am obsessed with is making sure whatever I do get involved in, there's a real kind of aim there and a real vision and a real outcome to work towards. And I think that's what I need, and that's what drives me. So I think that's what that's what drives me, and what I find fulfilling, I guess.
And does that kind of thirst for outcomes exist for you outside of your work and the sort of deliverables? So do you have passion projects or initiatives or something like that beyond the workplace?
Yeah. So I think the thing that springs to mind and why I'm smiling is my younger lads, Seb and Lucas. Me and my wife Jo, we're quite obsessed with them, and we see them as a project almost, because they're 10 and 12. They're brilliant lads, and they're really excelling with their sport. They're both in Leeds United academy, so they're very good at football, and they're really impressive lads, and they're doing well at school, etc. So I think we see them as our project. So I think developing them and giving them the platform and making sure they achieve their, they've got a lot of potential. So I think that seeing them through and giving them the platform and pushing them to without being pushy parents. I just realised that I sound a bit pushy parent, but I'm not, doing it in a balanced kind of way, and giving them the opportunities and really spurring them on is our big passion project, I guess, outside of work.
Obviously, a big part of who you are, 4/4 of who you are is your children, with all 4 of them. And I wonder if we could just spend a few moments just thinking about you as a father. So I have 2 very young children. One's 3.5, the other's 1.5. And I work I'm contracting similar to yourself. And a lot of the work that I do is consultant kind of projects. So there's often a lot of travel anticipated with that kind of thing. And that pulls completely against, and actually I've decided not to do any travel for the foreseeable future whilst everyone is so young, and to be fair on my wife and all this kind of thing. And those are the sort of choices that I've made that I didn't really anticipate, how being a father might impact where I choose to work, what I choose to do, what I agree to do. I wonder, you're a little bit ahead of me in the fatherhood spectrum. I wondered, do you have any experiences in your career or in your past at all where being a father has trumped a potentially great opportunity or presented challenges in some way?
No, it's a good question. So I think the thing that springs to mind is that when the lads were very young, well, just before they were born and when they were very young, I had about 5 or 6 years where I was pretty much based in London. I had a flat down there and lived down there and did various roles down there, and it was a really good thing for my career, and it gave me I've always had a thing about working in London and being part of the throng of being down there. So that was a real tick in the box for me. But once the kids, Seb and Lucas, started to get a bit older, I wanted to be, at home more and there for them, so that I could have an influence on their development, I guess, and be around for them really. So I think it has definitely influenced my job choices over the last few years, over the last five years, I guess. Yeah, 5 to 10 years. There's been more, starting with the co-op job actually in Manchester. The main reason I did that was to move close to home. So it's definitely an influence. I mean, I wouldn't rule out a bit of travel, but if I can, it's much better to try and be based nearer to home. And there's plenty going on in the Northern Powerhouse. So hopefully I can continue to do that.
Well, thank you for those reflections. Let's move on to the next theme, which is leadership and values. So I'll ask you a very broad one first, and I've got a whole ton of notes that I've been sitting on to ask you. So the first one, the first one is, do you think your leadership style has evolved over the years? And if so, how do you think it has evolved?
Yeah, I think it has. I think in my early stages of my career, I guess I was quite task orientated. And it was all about getting the job done. And what I began to realise is actually it's the more senior roles and the leadership roles is actually the softer skills come a lot more into play. And I like that side of things. So I like, the technical side of delivering a project, for example, and managing a plan and updating a plan and running the meetings you need to run and all that issue and risk management and all that good stuff is all well and good. And I've done plenty of that in my career. But actually what I begin to realise is that for these big transformation programs, it's the softer side of things. So it's like managing the stakeholders and setting the vision for the team and creating the right environment for the team and getting the right people in the right roles and letting them do their roles is what I realised it was all about to be successful in the leadership type roles. So it's definitely evolved, yeah, and I think it's a journey. It only comes with experience, to be honest, and working with other people I've seen do the roles that I aspire to do. So no, I worked for program directors in the past, and it was like, I just used to watch them and just the way they conducted themselves and the way they ran a meeting and the way they talked to people and the way they supported people and the way they dealt with awkward situations. And I think over the years, yeah, I've just learned kind of how to deal with that, and it just comes down to experience and just learning from people around me, I guess.
And I guess when you've looked at those other people who are kind of unwitting mentors, really, in how you have been shaped, which we'll get onto in the next theme, but when you look at those people and when you think generally about about yourself, do you have an idea of what you think the kind of key or most important qualities are for someone in a leadership position? So
I think I've always tried to be, one of my key things, and I think my dad told me this like years and years ago, was treat people like you want to be treated yourself. And that underpins a lot of how I operate. And that's all about being respectful for people, to different people and their situations. Don't talk down at people. Just be respectful. There's no reason why you shouldn't be. I think you've got to be a good listener. To be a good leader, you need to listen to people, listen to what's going on around you. Because quite often, certainly now, quite often have quite a big team and a lot going on. And there's no way you can be into all the details. So you've got to trust people to do their jobs, but also got to listen to them to understand what's going on and how you can help and support people. So I think those things, I've never been a micromanager. I've always been a give people the role, employ the right people into the right roles and give them the space and empower them almost to do their job, and then guide them, set them the goals and guide them, and support them. But so the good leaders that I've seen are not micromanagers. They're quite the opposite, to be honest. And then one other thing that was quite key, and I've got better at over the years, and I can still work on this, is be myself, basically. So I talked about putting home life and work life in different compartments, and I still think that's right, but I think you need to be yourself to be a good leader, and just bring yourself. Don't be different. And I've not always been good at that. I've always been quite a bit cold, I guess, and just like works, business is business and work, and let's get the work. But I think what I've realised is that actually people want people to be themselves and be natural. So that's another key trait, I guess.
So you've spoken before as well about the kind of learn from mistakes and move on, and you've just spoken a little bit more about some key qualities we think we need in leaders. And I guess the hope as a leader is that the way that you go about yourself trickles down or filters down into the way that people are behaving in your teams as well. So there's definitely a part of it, and we referenced it, we'll talk about it in a second as well, of how you operate and how that encourages teams to behave in whichever way, or influences cultures, maybe is even a better way to say it.
It touches on what I said earlier about creating the right environment. So I think I'm really keen to create an environment where people feel like they have a voice, and also where people feel like they're empowered to speak up, and they're also can collaborate with others. So I think running the big projects and the transformation programs, I think it's really important to create that kind of environment where people can do that. And it's really quite hard, actually, especially these days where everything's quite disparate and you have people working in a hybrid kind of way. You haven't got everyone together. So I think it's trying to get the right balance between supporting a hybrid work force location-wise, and creating that sense of collaboration, and that the setting up the right the meetings, the ways of working, which allows people to flourish, I guess, and collaborate with each other and respect each other, I guess. This is a bit of a random one, but I listened to Gareth Southgate when he talks about the England football team. He's kind of at the top of it, and he always talks, when I listen to him talk, and he always talks about creating the environment for all these different players to come together and come together as a team. And he always has the more experienced ones, and who almost like his lieutenants, and then he makes sure that everyone else has a voice, and it just lots of. I know that's a bit of a random one, but that's what I try and do, I guess. Is try and create a culture of that culture of collaboration that we talked about, that people can prosper and work together. And it doesn't always work, by the way, but yeah, you can all but try. And then I guess it's all about having that vision as well for them. So I think having the vision and that clear shared set of goals and outcomes, and to meet the vision, I think is really important as well. So I think if you get the right environment and the right vision and the right shared goals, I think you're halfway there.
In your role, you must be faced with a lot of decision making on a daily basis, and some of those decisions are clearer than others. How do you approach decision making when faced with ambiguity or uncertainty?
And so I've come across this a lot, actually, especially where you've got organisations who are working agile, essentially, where there's rather than spending a lot of time up front to define a set of requirements and what they're trying to do, which brings a level of confidence. A lot more people are just almost setting off now on the journey and working agile and dealing with things as they go, which is quite difficult if you're a program manager or a finance guy, where you're just looking for clarity and around plans and budgets, etc. But these days, this is certainly the role where I work at the moment. We're working agile. It's going pretty well, but it's been a roller coaster, because not all the answers. There's been a lot of ambiguity. So the way you I try and deal with it, and the way is try and develop guiding principles. So we've created a set of guiding principles recently, actually, for the thing I'm running at the moment, which really just sets out. It's a number of statements really that sets out to people, given the ambiguity, how we're going to. The intent really of how we're going to work and try and operate together, and give some guidance around how we work, when we need to align, when we need to escalate and align on, do something different to make a decision. So I think it's putting in some principles, I think it's empowering the teams to make as many of those decisions as they can. But I think there's always going to be times when those things need to be escalated up. And I think it's just creating some light. I hate to use the word governance because it's a bit dull, but to create some light touch governance to so there's a decision making forum, because there's always going to be some things that require some senior input, I guess. So I think the way I go about decision making in ambiguity where there's ambiguity is kind of guiding principles to help the teams on a day-to-day basis, empower the teams, to get the right people in the roles and give them the power to do as much as they can. So at the end of the day, things get delivered by the teams, not by some senior people locked in a room. So but then recognizing that not everything can be decided in the teams. There's going to be tension points that need resolving. I think that's where a decision forum or a steering committee is old language, but it's an old concept. But it's some kind of decision forum is the word I like to use.
I think a lot of people who are either moving into leadership positions or who are already in leadership positions struggle with finding a level of comfort in that kind of enablement, in that providing autonomy to the teams and kind of getting out of their way. I think you've already made it pretty clear that the way that you do it, or at least you sort of, one part of the equation is making sure they understand the vision, making sure they understand the direction. Is there, how do you, so you do that. So let's say that we're with the team right now, we've just set up the project, everyone's been given their, the vision and what they need to have achieved in it, whatever it is, the tasks, if we're going down to that level. How do you make sure, I guess, in that moment when you've kind of disseminated what we need, and then also how do you make sure sort of during the process of the project or whatever initiative it is it's working on, how do you remain comfortable? Like, what do you do to keep yourself comfortable, making sure that, of course, and when I say comfortable, I mean not kind of ignorant, but the point that you understand what's happening, you understand that they understand what they're supposed to be doing, so you can step back. I think a lot of people in leadership positions struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously in program leadership, so I never feel in control really of the thing I'm doing until I sound like a proper project manager here, until I've got a plan. So, but I think once you have a plan, a program. So at the moment, there's a program plan for the thing I'm running at the moment, and that provides the context for everything, for everyone. Working on that initiative, and then it also gives me something to measure and guide, and that's the same for everyone. So it gives me gives me something to in my hand. If not that I walk around with a plan in my hand, but you know what I mean. It gives me something that I can use to control what's going on, to measure against, and also I can use when I'm talking to a board, to an executive board, to like something I can talk against, and something. It's a context for everyone, really. Yeah, so having a good plan in place is essential, and it's not just me coming up with a plan. It's got to come from the people, from the teams. So I think getting a joined up plan that everyone's bought into is really important. And then I think having some simple kind of measurement, some KPIs or some metrics to measure the progress. So it's not just about measuring milestones on a plan. It's also how do we measure quality against what's been delivered in those milestones. So I think having a good plan in place, getting some good metrics around that, and then having the right set of meetings, I guess, to without it being a massive overhead on everyone and stopping people doing the actual work. Getting those in place is, in the simplest way, is the best way to kind of get control over something that I am leading and running.
Well, we've heard So much great stuff. Thank you so much, Nick. Let's move on to the fourth theme, which is mentorship, guiding, and being guided. Okay. Can you share any insights into the mentorship you've received throughout your career? I know we've spoken a lot about being in places where you've heard it, and you mentioned briefly about seeing other people and what they did. Can you maybe reflect on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think the good mentorship comes naturally. I think I've never chased it. So I think it has been formalised a couple. So when I was at IBM, they do formalise. You get a PDM, they call them a professional development manager, who manage your career, and they're really big on mentors. And that was the first time I'd seen it formally introduced, and that was great actually. But generally, I think the best mentors I've had have just naturally come from going about my day job, and someone I've either been working for or someone working with who's touched me, if you know what I mean, has captured my imagination. So and it's literally just took some time in with them and talk to them about all sorts, about how they got to where they were in their career, just ask for advice. And I think for me, that's what mentorship's all about. And I don't think it's this big formal thing that you need to create. And I know people can do that as well, but for me, it's kind of just naturally just almost selecting the seeing people around you and selecting someone who kind of has inspired you, or is doing something similar to where you want to be, and spending time with them, talking to them, asking them how they got to where they are, what makes them tick, what do they do in their spare time, how do they, what are the steps, what do you recommend to me? It's that type of conversation. So that's how mentorship's been for me over the years. And I've given you some examples, but the best ones really have been the Dave guy at the start of my project management career, who really was doing a role that I was aspiring to, and I liked him. I got on with him. I think that's really important as well, by the way. And he helped me, teach me the ropes and set me off on my journey, if you like, on project management. And then there was a couple at IBM. When I joined IBM, my first PDM was called Neil. He was my professional development manager. Neil was great because he was very focused on, obviously it was his job, but he was fantastic. He was the first person that got me really thinking about my own, from a personal perspective, my own career. And he was the one who really talked about, no one's going to do it for you. You need to, if you want to progress your career, you've got to do it. You've got to drive it. And he was really, he really resonated with me, and that's why I mentioned him here really. And then I got at the same time around that, I did actually get a formal mentor who was a program director within IBM, a big hitter kind of within IBM, called Paul Wainwright. It was called. He was a really, really nice guy, really calm and collected kind of guy. And I all I did with him, I had a few chats with him, and again it was pretty informal. Even though he's my formal mentor, he was informal, and we just talked. We just talked about how he'd got to where he was, and how I could kind of progress, my career as well. So that was that. And then the only other one I've not mentioned yet is when I was at Direct Line, a guy you might remember actually, Chris, but a guy called Alan Greenslade. I don't know if you remember Alan, but
yeah,
Alan
I remember him. Yeah,
he was my boss. My last role there, I was head of delivery, but he was the delivery director. And Alan was almost at the back end of his career, but he'd been a partner at Accenture, and he had tons of experience. And what he was brilliant at, which he really helped me with, was around stakeholder management and how you manage an executive on a journey, and just that whole process, and how to kind of use use one or two slides to help guide if you had a difficult, awkward decision to make, how you would guide that conversation with a number of different stakeholders and how you'd go about that and manage that to a conclusion. And he was really, really good at that. So I learned a lot off him as well. So I think, and they just all came naturally about, really, just because I was in the situation, and they were people who I kind of looked up to, I guess, at the time.
Sometimes when I look back on my career and people that I've been around, I think about instances that I've been a part of that I really haven't liked. And that doesn't mean that I made them happen. Have you thought about your own professional or personal growth in a way that's also guided by behaviors that you don't like? So almost like a negative mentor. And do you have anything that's happened to you that you might also be able to share, where you've seen someone do something and it's really stuck with you as that is absolutely not the right thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but there's two or three people can spring to mind who I've seen in senior positions being very, very direct and micromanaging people and just creating all the things I've talked about that are good things, and just creating the exact opposite environment. And I think not bullying, but maybe it's too strong a word, but being a bit over the top, really. And I've definitely seen that. It definitely that is not my style. It's definitely turned me off to that style of leadership. And you can see the way people react around that style as well. And it's quite toxic. And so I've seen that quite a bit. And absolutely, that has inspired me not to be like that. So good question.
Yeah, it's when I think about some of those, I sometimes I feel like I have more of those than I have actual sort of positive mentor stories sometimes. But I think it's a great being. I think you've mentioned it as well over the time we've been talking about being observant. Like when you're looking for a mentor, look and see how people behave. But I think there's a part of that which is not just looking for someone who is available. It's, as you said, looking for someone who inspires you, but then also being critical about it, looking for someone who really represents the values that you want to push forward in your own life. Because I think that's the only problem I see in sort of professional mentoring at companies is that maybe more often than not, the company is doing that to try and promote internally to internal roles, not so much about the individual, But I for me, the sort of seeing how people have acted and looking at what kind of commotion it's caused, it's like a free view, into, okay, if I ever did that, what would ever happen? Let's move into the final theme, which is conclusion. So when we reflect on all the things that we've talked about today, you as Nick Quaife now is very different to the Ernst Young trainee when you joined, and you started your roles and all the way up through. Is there anything that we've talked about today that, with your knowledge now, looking back, you think a bit differently about, or you think maybe was more significant than you maybe thought at the time?
I think when I was thinking about this conversation earlier, I think one of the things that, if I was to go back and to my younger self and say, Nick, you need to do something different, was back myself more, just be more confident. But honestly, when I was younger, I was like, I just didn't have I mean, I don't know. You said a few times, you seem quite focused, and it's got a lot. It's quite driven, and I am, but I don't think I've probably always had that, but I definitely was. Looking back when I was in my youth, I wish I'd backed myself more. I wish I'd been more confident, and that's a big thing that's I thought about and going through this process and talking to you, etc. And then, yeah, I mean, and then the evolution. It's been quite interesting just thinking about where I've come from and the evolution of the way I am as an individual and a leader, and a kind of the experiences and the job roles I've done, how that's all evolved over the time. It's been really interesting thinking about that. But I think backing myself when I was younger and being more confident, and going for it a bit more, I felt as though I didn't really get going until my mid-20s. And I think I could have, might be being too hard on myself, but because I've done all right, but I think I could definitely have done, could have done a bit more, a bit earlier with a bit more confidence, I think.
So I guess looking forward, and what we've spoken about today, and I appreciate it sounds like you have done a lot of reflecting anyway, and that's a present part of who you are by the sounds of things, to be able to see people behaving in a particular way, to understand what your values are. You must be very present and also bringing a lot of your experience in at the same time. I guess when you look to the future, is there anything, I know you mentioned something briefly earlier that you could do better at even still. Are there things that you're currently kind of working on to improve your either leadership style or your personal performance? Like, what are your thoughts on that, if you want to share it?
Yeah, I think the bring yourself to work one was a direct line value, actually.
Yeah, and I loved that as well.
Yeah, I really like that one. And I remember having a review. I didn't really have because I was an interim there, so I didn't really have a formal appraisal or anything. But I remember having a chat at that time of the year. I think it was with Alan actually, and I remember him talking about that one, and he was saying he didn't knock me down on it, but he said that's definitely where you can get better. And I was like really taken aback at the time, because I always thought, oh no, I'm pretty personable, I'm pretty easygoing and good to work for. But then he was like, no, you can definitely do more on that side. You've got a persona at work that's different to the persona I've seen when we go to the pub. You know what I mean? And he said you need to just work on that one a bit. So that's always resonated with me. Hence why, and it's not just because he said that, but that was definitely a moment that made me think about that. And that's one I constantly try and work on. In terms of go forward, in terms of my own kind of mentorship, I think the thing that I would quite like to get on, because I think when you get to like a point now where you've been working for 20, 30 years, is you've got all this experience. And I just want to try and pass it on more. And I don't think at the moment, whilst I do and try and do elements of it on a day-to-day basis, there's always the job to do. So I think there's definitely more I can offer there. And then there's also kind of just generally thinking ahead. I was thinking ahead to my next kind of roles as well. And there's I'm quite happy with the type of roles I do now, but then I'd quite like to do like that non-executive type role where you're kind of advising senior people really on their strategies, and they're kind of trying to help them, really guide them. And I think that's something I'd like to get into over the next 5 years, to try and pass on my experience that I've gained over the years.
I think part of the beauty of these podcasts is that there are so many podcasts which just focus on the Elon Musks and the upper tier, that 99.9% of everyone who listens to it will never achieve, but all of the things that we've spoken about today are genuine, real things that could propel you in that direction, but it's real because it's not packaged, so thank you for that. I guess then as we wrap up today, thinking now about the people who are listening now, is there anything that you hope that is a kind of key takeaway or key message that they might take from today?
Yeah, I think be yourself. I think be yourself, and then also take control of your career and your life and drive it yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you. So I think they're my two takeaways. And then to add to that, I guess there's the be respectful and treat others as you would like to be treated yourself, because I think that's a real powerful thing, a very simple statement, but I think it's very powerful in terms of the way we should all treat each other.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Mentor Collective podcast. If you enjoyed it, you're welcome to subscribe. You're also welcome to go to our website, thementorcollective.net, to find out about the other good work we do in mentorship. Wherever you are, I hope you have a great rest of your day.